Now we have another industry presentation and basically another pertinent area. We are talking about the applications that are on cloud, and we also talked about a lot of citizen data that is being gathered. So two important aspects, the cloud security and the privacy of that data. So for that, I would like to call on stage now Mr. Gaurav Jindal, Senior Manager, Business Development of Government Business from Thales, to talk. And may I request you to please keep your session brief. We are running behind schedule.
So, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gaurav Jindal, and I take care of business development for government and defense in Thales. Today, I'll be covering, I'll keep my session brief. I'll be covering basically the new challenges in cloud security and data privacy. As we have been hearing since morning, there's a lot of about digital empowerment and data explosion and stuff like that. So obviously, because of this kind of data explosion, many organizations have opted to move on cloud, and that is where the real challenge comes. So I'll quickly cover it in my slides. I'll start with just 2 lines about what Thales is. Thales has been there for almost a decade globally. We are #1 in security, although we definitely are #1 in aerospace. So right from cybersecurity, aerospace, and ground security, these all are the areas where Thales operates in. So we are about 19 billion company and about 80,000 employees on the roll across the globe. Specifically talking about our cybersecurity portfolio, our flagship product has been hardware security module, for which we have been leaders for almost 3 decades now. And coupled with the data encryption and key management, which is again, we are market leaders globally. And finally, the network encryption, which takes care of the data in motion protection kind of a thing. So if I were to quickly run through this, I would just highlight the point #1, where Ministry of Corporate Affairs data, which alone says that in the past 3 years, there have been about 5 lakh cases which have been hacked, documents or cases which have been hacked, and this data is only of Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Rest all organizations leave apart. So this is just to give you an idea. So these are basically, these are basically when I personally go or my team goes to and interact with the different CISOs or CTOs of different organizations. So these are real-time questions what we come across, that when you move on to cloud, then what happens to the security of the data? Because obviously you are moving all the data points are to the cloud. So what happens to the security? Who maintains the security? Who controls your data? And how do you manage that data when it is in cloud? So basically, the answer to all these questions lies in if you have control over these 4 Ws. That is what, where, who, and when. So when we say we can control that what keys are created, where the keys are residing, who has the access to the keys, and when the keys are basically revoked. So these 4 Ws, if we take care of, then the problem of cloud security is largely addressed. And coupled with, augmented with decoupling of keys. When we say decoupling of keys, that means where the data is residing and where the keys are residing, there should be at 2 different places. That is what we call decoupling of keys. So this slide essentially talks of, and this remains common across all the cloud providers. It has, let it be AWS, Azure, or Google. So if we see in this slide, the sense of this slide is that whatever service you take from a cloud provider, it might be infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. This first row, the responsibility of the data, always lies with the customer, that is you. if you are moving to the cloud, that doesn't mean that the responsibility of data moves to the cloud provider. Definitely, it is a shared responsibility, what we call. So they would have a responsibility, but at the end of the day, all the responsibility of answering back to your customers or any legalities, these all lies with the customer. So apart from this, this slide talks about the data in motion, basically. When we move on to cloud, so what are the challenges there? When you move on to cloud, the cloud provider charges you on the amount of egress data that you consume, right? So that means the more the data, the more the moolah you have to pay. And obviously, when they have to move the data out and they encrypt the data, there are a lot of overheads. Encrypt the data with the traditional methods, I would say. So there are a lot of overheads. That means the more the overhead, lesser the data is data packet, and hence higher the egress. So that again adds on to the cost of the data that is moving out of the cloud. So top cloud security risk areas, then what we, again, the challenges are that encryption key visibility. When the data you move on to cloud, then your keys, who all can see those keys? Are the data, are the administrators in, residing in cloud? Are the access privileged users all can see your keys, or no, that you have no clue to? Then the data loss, as I already discussed, if there is any kind of data loss, then the responsibility lies with you as a customer. Vendor lock-in, when you move on to a cloud provider, then obviously your entire data set is lying with the cloud provider. And in the event of any, means in case of any eventuality, then you are stuck with a single vendor or the cloud provider. Attaining compliance, this is important because when you are not aware what kind of security and how they are protecting the data. So from a compliance perspective, you would not be privy to the measures which the cloud provider is taking. And then key lifecycle management, which essentially means that how they are maintaining the key lifecycle management, because as per guidelines from different authorities like UIDAI, RBI, and stuff like that, and automated key lifecycle management is one of the essence to attain compliances and to pass on the audit. So another thing when you move into this direction is that these are another customer pain points, that when you encrypt your data bases, your sandboxes, your what I'm trying to say is that when you encrypt it in silos, then there is definitely the situation becomes very, very complex, because you need different type of skill sets, and obviously you are working in silos, so the manageability becomes an issue. So it is definitely this kind of approach is very complex, inefficient, and expensive kind of an approach to take. So now coming to, again, CSA is Cloud Security Alliance, which is a third party, and acknowledged by all the cloud providers. This is basically a globally acknowledged platform where the recommendations from CSA form the guidelines on security practices which the cloud providers should be following. So essentially, the encryption and key management and the CSA guidelines, they say that the keys shall not be maintained by the CSP, but maintained by the cloud consumer or trusted key management provider. So the underlying fact is that wherever you keep your data, the control of the data should lie with you, which means that the control of the keys, encrypted keys, should be lying with you. So as we have already discussed, that at the end of the day, you are the one who's responsible for your data security. So then what do you do for it? So there are different stages of data security in cloud, and the strategy you opt depends on what kind of data you have. It could be, I'll cover this better in the next slide. So basically, when you adopt the lowest strategy, which says that you take the native encryption from the cloud provider. So that is recommended for the most, I would say, most unimportant or insensitive data, wherein you decide that, okay, I am fine to take the risk. If there is a breach or a hack, let it be. So there, native encryption is recommended. When the data is a little sensitive, then the approach what has been advised is to bring your own key, wherein you use the key manager services from the cloud provider, but bring your own key and put it on the KMS of the cloud provider. And when the data is highly, highly sensitive, for example, PII data, Aadhaar numbers, PAN cards, and stuff like that, then the best practice is bring your own encryption, wherein you have the access and control to the keys, and you control the data, as I mentioned earlier. I spoke about key lifecycle management. So when you, on the right side, you see when you move onto a cloud, the key lifecycle management might not necessarily be automated. So creating and backing up of keys is done automatically, and rest all which are marked in red are done manually. So obviously there are chances of human errors, and hence which leads to your non-compliances and audit requirements. So when you move to a cloud key management, then on the left side, which are all in green, that is the recommended approach which one has to take, which says that automated key lifecycle management, wherein the keys are generated, expired, versioned automatically, and there is no human intervention required there. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, I would just on this slide, I have spoken almost most of this. This is just a comparison on BYOK, BYOE, and stuff like that. The only point I would like to highlight here is extreme left side, Sapuna, wherein when you move to a cloud and you don't have the control of your data or the data keys, then what kind of defense you take in the court, basically, because you don't have all the access to whatever breaches, who accessed what, and stuff like that. So in case there is a hack or your data is lost and somebody files a litigation against you, then you don't have a line of defense in the court of law. So this I would not dwell much into. This is just a diagram, a little busy slide and a little technical one. I would rather move on to this, which talks about the Thalass solution to all these problems what we have discussed, what are the concerns of the CISOs. So Thales has an offering which we call as Cyber Trust data security platform, which not only discovers and protects, but also gives the control to your data. So this platform essentially is a combination of hardware security modules and encryption agents, which does your data discovery and classification for the PII data. That is an essential requirement, means without finding which data you need to protect, which PII data resides where, obviously you cannot protect. So it does data discovery and classification. Then it encrypts the data. As I mentioned, as I was discussing about the keys, so it has a robust mechanism of database encryption, application encryption, and tokenization for Aadhaar numbers and stuff like that. And then the key management, I have discussed again, the key management, the entire key lifecycle management, what you can do centrally sitting in your premises, even if your data is lying in cloud. So the advantages are that you have a single GUI to auto-discover and classify the sensitive data as required by the Aadhaar Act. Then from a single console, and basically you control the data and encrypt. When you encrypt and tokenize, you control your data at your end. So when we talk of data encryption at rest, here, if you care about data at rest, then why, obviously you should be worried about data in motion encryption and how you protect it. There are obviously a lot of technologies like VPN and stuff like that, which do that, but obviously there are better ways to do it because these technologies are now approximately 3 decades old. So for that, Thales has a high-speed encryptor, what we call as, which is a hardware device. So I would just run through the advantages of what Thales HSE has over traditional methods of protecting data in motion. So the latency in case of HSEs, as the name suggests, high-speed encryptors, the latency is almost negligible. The overheads of what we were talking earlier, that the egress, the cloud provider would charge you an egress, the amount of data that flows out of the cloud environment. So here the overheads are just 5% vis-a-vis 40% overheads when you do it the VPN way. So that saves a lot of money. In case of VPN, you don't have any control over the keys, whereas in case of HSE, you have the control over the keys. I would like to definitely highlight the second last point, which is the quantum key delivery and the quantum resistance, which essentially talks about any kind of risks which arise, which might arise maybe 2 decades down the line or 3 decades down the line when quantum computers come into play, and the data of the organizations which are important even then, like financial institutions and stuff like that, they are prone to get hacked. So HSE is completely quantum resistant as compared to the VPNs of the world. So the key takeaways are that you encrypt your data, personally identifiable data, such as Aadhaar, PAN, and stuff like that, and decouple your keys from the where the data is residing. Then turn your cybersecurity strategy inside out, which essentially means that start encrypting your most critical assets to ensure that even if an attacker passes your perimeter security, so you have a last line of defense in terms of encryption available with you. File-level encryption, which takes care of almost most of the problems or encryption needs. Encryption data and encryption keys, this is the most important takeaway. I would say that whenever you encrypt your data in cloud or on-prem, whatever the case might be. But decoupling of keys is the essence. You cannot keep the lock and the key at the same place. So decoupling is one of the most important strategies when you encrypt your data to avoid any kind of ransomware attacks or data getting stolen or stuff like that. So for securing data in cloud, as I have discussed, the cloud provider should not be having the control of your keys. The customer should be controlling the keys so that you have the entire control. And as I mentioned, vendor lock-in was one of the points which I had mentioned. So I forgot to mention that in our CDSB platform, this vendor lock-in problem is as well taken care of, because when you are controlling the keys and you have a centralized cloud key management software in place, then in that case, you don't end up into vendor lock-in kind of scenarios, because you can seamlessly move from one cloud provider to the other, to the third one. You have to simply port the keys to the other cloud provider. And it also works in multi-cloud providers kind of a scenario. If you decide to go in for 2 cloud providers or 3 cloud providers simultaneously for whatever business needs you might have, you can do it and still control all the keys and manage everything through a single GUI. That's pretty much from my side. Thank you so much.